Okay, this is an update on the progress of the Beaufighter. You've seen the landing gear. So, the last couple of weeks for my Christmas vacation, I've been working feverishly, and the first thing I want to show are the wing fairings. So those are all crafted from balsa, a 1/32 balsa. And I think it's a really good result. A little bit of filler and those things will look beautiful. They'll just detail up nicely. Then in the finishing department, I've just finished with the tail surface mounting, which I've decided to do with a removable configuration. It required some keying in to make sure that the installation was stable. So you can see it's quite stiff. So these two nylon bolts hold the entire empennage in place, but they are in fact independently keyed so that their position is held by the keys and the bolts simply carry the forces. Alright, now one thing I'm really happy about, a couple of things actually. I'm going to show you first, this is the landing gear servo assembly, and there's a little device I made. So what I'm going to point out here with the pointer is this servo here actuates the tail wheel landing gear, and the problem is how do I get the same servo to operate both the tail wheel and the air retract system. This is the pneumatic switch for the air retract system, which will be in the wings. And so this is a solution that I came up with, was to mount a pivot point, the switch, and the servo arm all in a coplanar attitude, so that when the servo actuates, it operates the switch. And I'm going to show that a little bit later on. Now this, you'll recall there's a canopy, a gunner's position halfway down the Beaufighter, an ungainly looking thing. And so I've just started work on the canopy. This is not the actual canopy. This is the rough canopy. What I've done is I created a foam plug, which was a rough plug. To get it smooth, I applied several layers of epoxy and sanded it down. The problem with that is when I did the vacuum forming, if you look carefully at the canopy, you'll see that the epoxy actually adhered to the inside of the PET G, which is the plastic. So then what I did is I prepared a plaster of Paris plug, and this is the actual plug. So I was able to further work on that to smooth it right down, and also to plan some bars. And with that, I was able to pull what I think will be the final canopy. And here is the final canopy, which is a much better outcome. I'll put it beside the test canopy. You can see the difference in clarity. That's the test canopy. And this is the final canopy. So the originals were not that clear. They were done with perspex and they were somewhat milky in color, so I actually think that's a very nice outcome. The challenge will be to create the bars that are on the outside of that canopy, My plan here is I'm going to tomorrow buy some ABS or some just simple styrene. I'm going to pull a second solid canopy over top of this one, and out of that canopy I will cut out all the window spaces so that there'll be bars that go on the outside that will look just like the original, and then that will give me all the detail on the aluminum bars. And there were some sliding windows and actually an open spot at the back for Vickers machine gun. I'm using the same technique to do the main canopy, and this one you can see the epoxy is lifted off because I've already pulled the first or the original rough canopy out of that. And what I had done here, let's see if we can get better lighting, is I had built a little blue foam box to go in the canopy. Then I took that out of the aircraft and I added some additional foam for the overlap with the fuselage, and then I added some additional foam in order to have a better vacuum forming result. So I pulled the working copy of that yesterday, and I'll show you that. So this was the result. You can see, for instance, there's a big ripple there from epoxy that I hadn't fully sanded out. You can see how the epoxy sticks to it. Now the reason it's all taped up like this is I had to cut it off the foam block because it had all welded to that epoxy. But then I taped it up and I poured a plaster of Paris plug, which will take several days, if not a week, to cure and to release all of its water. And then I can do some final sanding on that. Just want to bring this perspective around a little bit, and I'll be able to get rid of some of the little reflections and imperfections here, and it will be a much nicer result. Now, I'm really happy with the front of the canopy. This was in the original, it was a piece of armored plated glass, and the rest of the canopy was made out of Perspex. So Perspex is just an early polymer plastic, and in fact you can still buy it. So that's going to be the canopy. Again, I'm going to pull a second canopy on top of that, which will be out of solid styrene or ABS styrene, and I'll prepare bars out of that. Now I'm going to show the operation of the tail wheel, and we're going to take off the dorsal fin, we're going to take off the rudder and fin, which have not yet been set up finally, and I've just started to configure the servos. And this is something that has challenged me, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about how I was going to optimize this particular installation, because it is something I didn't want to mess around with too much and cause a problem. So now I've just tonight finished the elevators, and the challenge here was how to configure a V-tail, and so now you're looking at the operation of the V-tail elevators. I'm using two separate servos on a Y harness. I now think I should have bought a 9-channel radio. I could have configured these on separate channels, but as it is, this is working quite well. It's quite symmetrical. I can hear a little bit of a binding spot. Okay. Now I'm going to take you to the tail wheel. There we go, and I'll just put the wheel on so you can get a better sense of that. Just pause or excuse the camera work. Alright, so we'll step back here and get a better sense of the aircraft. And there we go. There's our tail wheel retract. And we'll finish up with showing how that switch is actuated with the tail wheel servo. So, whoops, I'm getting some funny perspectives. And there you go, you can see how the pneumatic switch is being operated. I'll see if I can get a better camera angle here. And that's a result I'm just really happy about. That solves a big problem that's been challenging me. And there we go. So we should have the fuselage more or less ready up to the point of final fill and covering. And then I'm going to start on the nacelles on the wings, and the wings you can see are over on the other cabinet.